Is Psalm chapter 22. Truly your soul finds rest in God by salvation. My salvation comes from him. Truly he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will never be shaken. How long will you assault me? Would all of you throw me down, this leaning wall, this tottering fence? Surely they intend to topple me from the lofty place. They take delight in lies. With their mouths they bless, but with their hearts they curse. Yes, my soul finds rest in God. My hope comes from him. Truly he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depends on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. Surely the lowborn are but a breath from the highestborn are but a lie. If weighted on a balance, they are nothing. Together, they are only a breath. Do not trust in extortions or put vain hope in stolen goods. Put your riches, through your riches increase. Do not sell your hearts to them. One thing God has spoken, two things I have heard. Power belongs to you, God, and you, Lord, is unfailing. And you reward everyone according to what they have done. And the third reading is from Philippians also, verses 4 to 9. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything. Do not be anxious about anything. But in every situation, but every prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your heart and your minds in Jesus Christ. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice. And the God of peace will be with you. May God bless the reading of his word.
So our message this morning is coming from Lisa, is it Nielsen?
Yes, that's
Lisa
right.
Nielsen. So come on up. We'll be kind, we'll be gentle.
Thank you.
We won't be judgmental. Okay?
Appreciate it.
All right.
Great. Is it okay if I stand here?
You can stand wherever you want.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. Oh, thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be here, but I have to admit a little anxious as well. But I'm glad to be here. So I'd like to open up the sermon with kind of a question to think about. Have you ever received terrible advice? In particular, something like, oh, just don't worry. Stop worrying. Stop it. Don't worry. Stop it right now. Or perhaps you've received bad advice such as, if you ignore that problem, it'll probably just go away. Or keep a stiff upper lip. If you just act like everything's fine, it's the only thing you need to do. Well, I know I have received advice like that. Really well-meaning people in our society likes to, value that strong, moving forward, got everything under control sort of appearance and demeanor. But the reality is that we can't do that all the time. Or at least for some of us, that's a bigger struggle than for others. And for me personally, these phrases don't help me at all. As a self-proclaimed anxiety-prone person, I don't have to tell you about the anxieties that abound in our world today. If I were to give examples, they would just be like, well, yeah, that's the world we're in. And so, in my preparation for this message today, I experienced anxiety, which was not a surprise. Anxiety is kind of what I live with and what I deal with on a regular basis. And so, understandably, the verses today that were shared with you might make me come across as hypocrite number one. I mean, like, this anxious woman is up here preaching to us about not being anxious. Well, that's precisely what I'm going to try to help you with today through sharing of my own experiences and giving a perspective on these verses that can hopefully help us carry on. Now, I chose passages from Philippians because the encouragement is so enriching. When Paul writes to the Philippians, he is writing from a position of being incarcerated. But his words of encouragement ring out strong and true, and I really just clung to that, especially during this season with so many things to be anxious about. In fact, I am just so anxious. I don't know if you can relate to this, but there have been times I've been driving in my car down the road, and then all of a sudden I think, where are my keys? Where are they? Do I have them with me? Where in fact my keys are in the car's ignition because I'm driving the car. So your anxiety might not quite be like that, or maybe you're not an anxious person, and that's great, but I just want us to consider how anxiety plays out in Paul's letter to the Philippians and what we can glean from that. And then anxiety, as I'll go into, is coupled to power sometimes. So power, as was briefly mentioned in the first passage, Christ yielded power, or did not use his divine power to prevent his crucifixion. So essentially, he gave up that powerful capability in the moment to say, yes, I can suffer and die at the hands of men, and I will do that for because of God's love to help redeem the world. And so in that way, Christ is set to be our example for how we can abundantly love others. And it seems like such a strange thing to be like giving up power, loving others abundantly through not expressing power or might, but in fact to show love through being humble, meek. And so as Christ decided to be fully human in that moment, although he is both fully God and fully human, he did not resist his arrest or death. And so to carry out this love that Christ gave through his sacrifice, through giving up power, this really goes against what we hear in our regular society, in media, in sometimes even the values we're taught indirectly throughout our culture. Because in our secular sense of the world, power is needed to build up a kingdom. Power can be used for very good things. And I know for me, if I'm honest with myself, I do seek power. Because I see power as a way to help others. Now, when I say power, I don't necessarily mean lightning bolts or a strict authority or things of that nature. But power is the ability to influence others, to take action. That's how I perceive it. And so even though I don't want to take over the world or run for political office or have an army of followers behind me, I have to admit I do seek that power because I want to help others. I want to be actionable. I want to help things change in positive ways. But that is actually, in some ways, the opposite of what Christ did for us on the cross. He yielded that power, demonstrating that the kingdom of God would be best built upon his choice to give up power through, as the verses say, emptying himself. And so from that, most earthly kingdoms are just, not built on a different structure of power than what Christ demonstrated on the cross. And then when Christ was crucified, his lowliness, which sometimes we associate with being downcast, in ancient times, that word for loneliness would have been corresponding to being despised, to being, despicable. But Christ was lowly. And he didn't let that negative connotation of humbling himself in that way, putting himself out there to be crucified. He did it out of love, thus forever changing how we can demonstrate love for others through our own humbleness and lowliness. And Christ gained the title Christ, the Messiah. Sometimes it can be easy to think of that word Christ as being like his last name. We hear it all the time, Jesus Christ. But as the Messiah, he gained that lordship, that title, and God honored him through God's glory with that. And so if we were to emulate Christ, we're called to be humble and lowly. But this sometimes can lead to concerns because we do not want to belittle ourselves. But as the phrase goes, you want to think of yourself less, but not think less of yourself. So to make sure that you keep up a healthy love for yourself, but you simply have the outward goal of helping others more so than tending to your own wants or desires. And this is important because conceit goes both ways. Often when we hear be humble, we think, okay, don't be arrogant, and that's good. You don't want to be boastful and proud and those sorts of things. But conceit goes both ways. On the flip side, we don't want to be so concerned with ourselves that we don't think of others because we're busy thinking about, oh, poor me. I'm just a terrible person, or I need to do this, or I'm so anxious. If I do this, how will that impact this? If I do that, how will it impact that? What are they going to think about me? That's just a taste of my anxiety for you. And so conceit can go that way too. We are busy thinking about yourself and your own lowliness or what's wrong with you, what you need to do better, insulting yourself. That's no good either. A conceited person could be very boastful and proud, or so wrapped up in their own distaste for themselves and miserable condition that they do not think about anyone else because it's all about them and how poor or bad they are or how miserable they are. So to avoid that situation, but we want to think of others more than we think of ourselves, Paul mentions a common sharing in the Spirit. So what this means is as a community, it takes more than ourselves to help others, to reach out, to be the us in the people of God, not just individuals standing alone. And so how this can look is we want to emulate Christ's love through releasing power or through not seizing power, but to make sure that love is experienced within our community. So this can look like putting others' needs in front of our own wants and desires. Now, I'm not saying put others' needs over your own needs, but giving up your wants and desires for those who have needs stronger than your own. This can look through demonstrating compassion through our prayers and actions, and helping causes that might not impact us directly, but still giving our time, our service, our prayers to help those in situations we might not even comprehend, but to show that compassion for others in different environments, who have different things going on, very different from our own lives. And how does this connect to anxiety, which is a topic I can never get too far away from? Well, when we care for others, especially in community setting, sometimes we can develop an anxiety that is a side effect of loving and caring for others. So such as being worried about someone else, concerned for their needs, finding out about these terrible things that are going on in the world and feeling like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. What can be done? And so sometimes anxiety can be a side effect of our care for others and our love for others, concerns, worries. And so in the second part of the passages today from Philippians, Paul writes that God is with them and that God will grant them peace, and do not worry. But as I mentioned earlier, do not worry. Oh my gosh, I'm worrier number one. What is this? What can we do with that? I don't want to tell everyone that you're being hypocrites by worrying, that worrying is sin. In fact, I'd like to share some perspective on the topic to help you consider worry in a way that could help lead to something positive. Because as I interpret it, when Paul says never worry, right after that, he says we need to take it we need to let our petitions be known to God in prayer. We need to do something about it. God knows we are prone to anxiety, especially myself, and he knows that can come about. He created us to be emotional beings. Our emotions are not something that we should try to repress or push back, but they are a part of how we were created. And so through our prayers, I encourage myself and others to let our worries be known to God, to admit them to God. We don't need to judge ourselves for worrying. I don't know about you, but I've certainly worried about worrying. And there are things we can do to live with that, to be at peace with that, despite the worry still being there. Now, one way of thinking about this as well is that anxiety is connected to fear. So there's a book called Transforming Our Painful Emotions that's written by pastors. And it says fear moves us beyond lethargy, bracing us for action. And so we need to be motivated not by fear, but by our love for others to lend a helping hand. So to move past fear, we need to get over these predictions that bad things are coming all the time. Like if I forgot something, that terrible things will happen. I don't know about you, but forgetting something's one of my fears in my mind. Oh my gosh, this notebook, I was terrified last night. If I did not take this morning, I'd be a fool. I wouldn't have my sermon written out. I'd be done for. But that's just a dramatic overplay of the fear. We can move past that fear, even though we don't have control over everything. We don't have control over our environment. We don't have control over other people. We don't have control over so much in our lives. God can be with us when we tell him about our vulnerabilities, whether it be through prayer, spiritual journaling, talking to a friend or a pastor. But letting these out to God is ways we can cope and build positive things from our worries and anxieties and our fears, to turn them into actions we can take to help others. And so from that book, Transforming Our Painful Emotions, they also say anxiety is psychological security at risk. When we don't feel in our mind, we don't feel safe and secure. And one thing is we can't always feel safe and secure. The world is dynamic and crazy, and we can only control how we respond to it, not how everything works and operates. And so, along with going to God, it's important to know ourselves and to open ourselves up to our emotions in ways that we can work with them and work past our anxiety. So ultimately the goal would be not to be anxious about the anxiety, but to keep in mind that Paul tells us to bring it to God. And along with that too, I would encourage others who might suffer the way I suffer with it to seek professional help, see a therapist. I myself am on anxiety medication, which has helped me greatly. I know you might think she's a nervous wreck, but if you saw me a few years ago, you'd be like, yeah, that's helping you. So through prayer and these practices, I encourage us all to stop hiding. Sometimes we hide our emotions deep inside of us, and sometimes that's what we've been taught to do with not having an alternative. But hiding is something that can help us, or hiding is not good for us because it causes us to want to seek to control things, to control ourselves in a way, to help to not yield to God's power, but to try to take power for ourselves. So if we hide and conceal those negative emotions, those painful emotions, that's us trying to take control. And we know that only God can help make things better in our lives. And so, as said in Paul's writings to the Philippians, whatever is true, honorable, fair, pure, acceptable, commendable, excellent, praiseworthy, think on those things, which can be difficult, but through encouragement from others, keeping others at the center of your mind and your hearts, then as Paul also says, then the God of peace will be with you. Amen.